Welcome back to the Redeem Podcast. I'm Lauren Burns, your host, and today we're diving into a powerful and practical conversation every parent needs to hear. In a world where our kids are consumed with devices, social media, and video games, it's no surprise that anxiety and depression are rising at staggering rates. My guest, Jeff Nelligan, is a father of three and a passionate advocate for raising strong, grounded, resilient kids. Jeff shares 4 life-changing lessons he learned from raising his 3 sons, wisdom that will help you step in, redirect the narrative, and redeem the story inside your own home. His perspective is refreshing, hope-filled, and full of strategies you can begin using today. Before we begin, I want to ask a quick favor. If this podcast encourages you, please hit subscribe and leave a comment or review. It helps more listeners discover the Redeem Podcast and join this community of hope and faith. All right, let's get into today's conversation with Jeff Nelligan. Have you ever found yourself struggling through life's unexpected twist, wondering, this isn't what I planned or hoped for? If so, you're not alone. Life rarely goes as expected, even when we think we've mapped it all out. Psalms 107:2. Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story, those he redeemed from the hand of the foe. Welcome to the Redeem Podcast, a place of encouragement and hope. Through honest conversations and powerful interviews, we'll explore stories of transformation and resilience, even in the face of the impossible. I'm Lauren Burns, your host, and I'm so glad you are here. Please welcome Jeff Nelligan to the Redeemed Podcast. Jeff is a father and he is an author and he has many years in the political realm, and the name of his book is 4 Lessons from My 3 Sons. And I'm like, yes, I need to listen and read and learn all the things about raising boys and girls and kids in general, especially in the world that we live in. So, Jeff, thank you for taking the time to share and to come and share with my audience about this important topic. You were talking about redeemed. You know, what is redemption? And redemption is restoration and healing the broken areas. And that means with our children too. Thank you for coming on and sharing with us what you have learned. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself and your boys?
Certainly. Lauren, it's a pleasure and a privilege to be on. My book has resilience in the title, and I'm talking to someone who has demonstrated resilience far beyond anything anyone could ever comprehend. So it's an honor to be on this show with you, and I mean it. The resilience factor that you demonstrated so well, that's at the heart of the book, and it is the ethos of how I raise my 4 boys. As for me, just as you said, author, dad, spent a lot of years on Capitol Hill, was a presidential appointee in 2 administrations, was on campaigns, and now as a public affairs executive in Washington, D.C.
Mm. Wow, that's a lot of big titles to take, and to be able to raise your 3 boys. Are they all in the military now?
Yes, they are, Lauren. 2 in the Navy, 2 lieutenants in the Navy. One is a recruiter in the Midwest after doing 4 years at sea in various deployments.
Mm.
Mediterranean, Persian Gulf, North Atlantic, all over Far East, Tokyo, Hawaii, Pearl Harbor, Guam. The other is stationed now in Brussels as a NATO attaché at NATO headquarters in Casteau, Belgium. Third kid is a West Point graduate, and he is playing pro rugby on a waiver from Secretary of Defense Austin, and he'll be back in the service later this fall to begin his 5 years or more of being an infantry officer.
Wow, I can't imagine how proud you are, to be able to say that about your boys. I have a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old, and my prayer is always, okay, God, show me what you're calling them to do. What are their gifts and their talents, and how do I guide them in that? It's hard. You give us practical things in your book. I mean, I think at the age of 7, you had your boys go into a grocery store and have a $5 bill and tell them to go make change because you're teaching them confidence. So Talk to us about some of those practical things that you were trying to teach your boys.
Certainly. And I like the way you put calling, because I think all kids have a calling, and it's
Mhm.
up to us and God to find out what it is. And we can if we focus hard enough on it. In terms of that story, that
Mhm.
was always the building of confidence. I sent him into this massive grocery store in the middle of this mall in Washington, D.C., and said, go get the old man change. And I handed them each a $5 bill. And it was a task. And I said, it's not a race, but just come back here with the change, or don't come back until you have the change. And of course, they set off. They were delighted. And one kid came back after striking out at several stores in the mall and in the grocery store. Another kid came back with 20 quarters in his pocket. But they all came back, and it was like the first test of them being in this swirling place of strangers
Mhm.
and chaos and crowds and everything, to actually accomplish the tasks that had been set before them. I just kept increasing and escalating the tasks. We'd go to a restaurant, and I'd point to the 6-year-old and say, memorize the entire order and tell the waiter. And sometimes I'd send him into a sketchy 7-Eleven, and one kid with a $20 bill, and I'd say, go get us Doritos and Gatorade and come back to the car. You constantly build this confidence that these kids can perform under a little bit of pressure and then increasing amounts of pressure. But also, what you're doing is you're giving them that idea, that muscle memory, that any obstacle or challenge can be overcome.
Mm.
And so that was the basis of doing all those small little things that had a practical application in their world.
Being able to talk to someone, like mom and dad are not going to hold your hand. You have to go communicate with the person to try to get the money that you want. And you have to ask for change. And then you have to count it out. There's a lot of little steps there because I know my boys look at me like, aren't you going to talk for me? Aren't you gonna, I'm like, no, you have a voice. You can speak.
I like the way you put that, because that's the biggest kid problem, I think, with kids today being so much addicted to the glowing rectangle, the iPhone, the screen, the iPad, the computer, is that their socialization, that is being able to talk to someone else, whether it's an adult or a kid, has been
Mhm.
severely limited. It makes you actually have to grapple with that kind of stuff. Another thing we did, for example, by the time they turned 8, they had to make all the appointments on the phone for their
Mm.
various doctors or dentists. We give them the phone number and say, you're going to ask for this date and this time, and then these other dates if that doesn't work. And you're going to do it yourself, and I'll stand near you, but it's all you. So every kid at 8 started to be able to get on a phone with somebody and be able to write things down and converse on sometimes tough topics. That's all part of this practical world that's all around us that we can utilize, that can give them that resilience and that confidence.
I love that example because a couple things. I've had my boys complain, well, you didn't tell me that we had an appointment. All of a sudden, they're turning things on me. And so you're giving them, it's on you. You made the appointment. Now, we do have a shared calendar. And so everyone can see the calendar, which is great because they'll remind me, hey, we have haircuts. So that's very nice. But I like that. You're teaching them how to talk on the phone, how to be responsible. What does your schedule look like? And make it work. Because we were talking about too, redemption in the world that we're living in right now, and that's what you were talking to me about, is we can redeem this parenting. We can redeem these kids in the world that we're living in. We can still teach them these kinds of skills.
That's why I like even the title of the podcast, Redeemed. Another word for redemption is we have to redeem our kids from the culture that surrounds them.
Mhm.
And most of it comes right through this thing right here and through other devices. A constant, vulgar, just open sewage pipe into their
Mhm.
minds, taken in a passive situation. A typical kid today between the ages of 10 and 18 spends 8 hours and 47 minutes on their phone a day. And that doesn't count homework that they do on another screen. What you've got is a great book written about this is Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, who is kind of studied digital media for 20 years, the advent of the iPhone in 2007, and then the real expansion of broadband in 2010 to give everybody as much as they could consume on the internet, and how this has affected the mental acuity of this whole Generation Z. That culture is something that you have to take away from your kids and raise them according to the ways you want them raised, with your values, faithfulness and trust, resilience, confidence, ambition, courtesy, just personal courtesy. You have to teach them
Hmm.
that, because the culture will not.
Hmm. And you talk about courtesy in the book. And one of the things you were giving an example of going to the grocery store, getting your kids to look up from their phone. You use the example of how many people do you see in the grocery store with a sweatshirt from a college or from a
Right.
certain sports team, because you're getting them to be aware of their surroundings. I was like, that's a
Yes.
genius idea.
Yeah, I should tell you right off the top, my kids didn't get a phone until they were in the end of 11th grade. And we had a TV that may or may not work on any given night. And
Mm,
we had no devices around. I had my personal phone, and so did their mom, but we never really looked at them that much around our kids. So our kids had a different upbringing than, let's say,
mhm,
kids today. I gave you that 8 minutes, 47 minutes. Kids between the ages of 3 and 5 suck down about 110 minutes of screen time every day.
mm.
I mean, 3 and 5. It's become a nanny for parents to use, and it's going to have that kind of effect. And it already is with Generation Z, as Jonathan Haidt writes about in his book.
Anxiety. I've never heard of so many kids dealing with anxiety and the
Yeah.
lack of confidence too.
Yeah. And, it shows up. I mean, you and I probably have tons of anecdotes about Gen Z kids. Well, I just gave you one. The anecdotes are backed up by the numbers. You're on
Mhm,
a phone 9 hours a day. There's something not right with you. Okay. That's a common sense fact. But then you delve into more of this Generation Z and what they're facing. 40% of them have already a chronic condition by the age of 18.
mhm,
33% of them, exactly one third, are overweight or obese. Half of them between the ages of 10 and 22 feel anxious at least
mhm.
2 or 3 times a week, feel anxious. So you've got a generation. And then if you go to the older edge of that generation, they've left college, they're going into the workforce. There's big surveys done by Forbes, Wallet Hub, and Sinclair. And they note that, and the three surveys, thousands of hiring managers, all come up to pretty much same numbers. 68% of hiring managers say their Gen Z hires are not up to the job.
Yeah.
70% of Gen Z workers are fired before their first year is up. And 31% of Gen Z bring their parents to an interview with a hiring manager.
Wow. Did not know that.
Yeah. So we can talk about the culture and in this anecdotal way, the kids are anxious and they're not able to converse. Those are the numbers. Those are the facts. So the anecdotes we see are borne out by the statistics.
So, how do we restore our kids and our parenting?
Exactly. And this is probably a good stat for you. I'll say the stat and then maybe it'll provide impetus to all parents who are listening. 75% of the time we're going to spend with our child in their lifetime, it's over by the time the kid turns 12 years old.
Mm,
And 90% is over by the time the kid turns 18. So if you really want to develop and mold and shape that kid with values and fortitude, you've got to start really early. You start, for example, with the tests that I gave in the book. And the tests are given because we know of all adults I know, everyone hits a wall. No one gets a free ride. There's obstacles and setbacks every day. And if you can get a kid who can take and hit those obstacles and setbacks and not fold up, it becomes a reflex and a muscle memory to continue to hit those obstacles and get around them or over them. So that is the idea, that you don't have the snowplow parent. You let the kid
mm.
suffer and fumble so that he or she learns how to stand on their own 2 feet, because there's no other alternative.
So let them fail and have the consequences. Don't do their homework for them.
Right, right. I mean, in terms of three actionable items, I always will say this to parents who speak with me who have young children. The three actionable items are very easy. Number one, you have a social media contract with your kid,
Yes.
whatever age the kid has, and he or she has a phone or a device from school or whatever. And the social media contract also puts responsibilities upon the parent for not constantly being like this when you're with your kid.
Mm,
No phone in the car, no phone at a meal, no phone outside, 1 hour or 2 hours a day max. And also, what I always would say, and then, hey, boys and girls, we're cutting off the router at 7 o'clock, so
mhm.
you'll get nothing. So, a social media contract is something someone could do tonight. I have many examples on my website. Number two is, again, we're talking about actionable items that any parent listening could start today. Is every evening after dinner, no matter if you've eaten together or not, you take your kids for a walk in the
Mm,
physical, beautiful world God's created for us, through a neighborhood, to a park, whatever, and you just talk. No phones, no nothing. Just, hey, this is what I did today in my day, kid. Now tell me what you did. What was hot, what was not, what was up, what was down. And that just becomes a routine at 7 days a week, no matter what. And the
mhm.
third thing is that I have found useful with my guys, but I think when I tell parents about it and they do it, they find it really useful, is sitting down with a kid and reading. If the kid's too young, you read to them. If the kid is old enough to read, then you sit on a couch or in chairs in a room and you read for half an hour. And there's no distraction, no nothing. And you get that kid focused on the printed word without a screen coming at them.
Yeah.
And hopefully that becomes a habit for the kid. Now, those are three actionable items to fight the culture. There are many more, but those are three things, the social media contract being the most important, that could change a family's life in a matter of weeks.
Mm.
And that's probably what a lot of families need, is that shock treatment.
Yes, I agree. And, the person listening, if some of it sounds a little bit like, whoa, that's a lot, you can start with no phones in the bedroom. No phones after a certain time of the day. You could start, just some kind of change. I'll never forget, one of my good friends, Sarah, told me, Lauren, if you ever need to have a hard conversation with your child, get in the car, drive around. One, they can't get out because they're in the car. And two, you're not looking eye to eye, so it's not awkward. And I know for me and my boys, so many times they really do open up when it's just me driving around in the car, and we have great conversations that way too.
Yeah, Sarah's right. That's a great way of doing it. Also, too, another thing that as a parent, as a dad, I did is every Saturday at 8 o'clock, I took one kid or two kids down to the most peaceful place on the planet, a high school bleachers around a track. And we'd sit there on these empty bleachers with these empty fields before us. And maybe we'd bring donuts and we'd sit there and I'd say, okay, tell me about your week. What happened? Was really a challenge? What was a success? What was your win? And then I tell them about
Mm.
my week. But that, again, that routine, that cycle, the reflex and the muscle memory of just getting in that routine. And you put it very well. I mean, I appreciate that, Lauren. You don't have to start out craziness, but you start out with the boundaries and then you start to shrink them because you want
Mhm.
that control of your kid and you want that kid at the same time to blossom out.
Yes. And Jeff, what, 15 years ago, everything you said was our normal. And now we're like, that sounds crazy to have dinner without a cell phone in your hand.
Yes, yes. Isn't that amazing? Also,
Yeah.
too, Lauren, I always wonder, what did kids do with 8.5 hours not looking at a phone?
Yeah.
I mean, I know what my guys did, but I look around and I think, well, no wonder that 4 out of 10 kids between between the ages of 3 and 18 are overweight or obese. They
Overweight.
sit and watch a
Yes.
phone and they eat. Now, again,
Yes.
this is kind of sounds kind of harsh.
No, it's
If you've got one of those kids at 10 who's overweight or obese, guess what? By 20, he or she's going to be even bigger and the real health risks will kick in. So maybe shock treatment is something you might want to embrace real soon.
Mhm. Mhm. I don't think it's harsh. I think it's reality and truth, and, sometimes we gotta hear the truth, and we have to tell our kids the truth as well. My friend Allison got me hooked on Imogene Skincare's Glow Vitamin C Skin Serum, and now I can't imagine my morning routine without it. It's lightweight, smells amazing, and makes my skin look fresh and bright all day. I've noticed such a difference in my skin's texture and glow since I started using it. If you've been wanting to treat your skin to something nourishing and effective, this is the one I would recommend. Use the discount code Lauren10 to get a discount anytime you order from this amazing company. I will put it in the show notes so you can easily find it. How have you seen God show up in your life with your boys?
I tell you, I have prayed over so many things with them. It's morning and night devotionals. And I didn't pray, I didn't petition God. And I don't. I don't say, oh,
Mhm.
they need to win this game, or he needs to get into this college, or he's got to get an A at the Naval Academy on chemical engineering test. I never did. I just said, geez, just watch over them, put them where they're supposed to be. I'm doing everything I can here on the ground, but you, that intercessory prayer, David Michael Jeremiah had a whole sermon on intercessory prayer for loved ones, sons and daughters,
Mhm.
and how that is just when you're just at the end of your rope with no resources at all in your mind. That's the one thing you can do. I think that has been so powerful because I've been doing it for so many years. My eldest kid is 29 years old, and I've been doing it forever, morning and night. And for some reason, all the prayers, not the petitions, just the overall make him a good kid. It's all worked out. I think if you get into the petition game, you're kind of doomed. You just can't ask for, he really needs to do well in this class or whatever, whatever thing you can think of. I've kind of shied away from that. It's just the overall take care of them. Another day.
Yeah, you're not trying to control God when you're praying. You're like,
Right. You can't,
because
yeah,
we do that.
yeah. Sometimes there's certain things I've prayed for, but I've felt guilty doing it.
So you're setting an example for your boys. I have learned to tell my kids I pray for you because I do a lot of praying, but sometimes I don't tell them or even over my husband. And so I need to remember to tell them, hey, when I'm up on the couch at 5 in the morning and y'all are asleep, I am praying over you.
Yeah.
And that's setting that example.
Yeah, it is. I give them books that I think that they should read, and they will do it because the dad doesn't ask much. But if the dad's asking you to read this, and they'll do it, and we'll
Mhm.
discuss it. But I think that's the major way God has entered the realm, so to speak, just that constant
Mhm.
intercessory prayer.
You just said something else, Jeff. You talk about in your book about when you're talking to your kids, not to nag them and go into this whole long thing because they're only going to hear this little piece of it and bring in humor into the conversation.
Yes, platitudes are as effective as a brick. They just aren't. And the idea of just constantly saying, be a good person, that's just jive. You've got to get to them. Humor will capture a kid's attention in a moment. And if you've got the skill to turn that humor into a life lesson or a lesson and make things easier, it will always work. And that's my book. It's 80 pages. The appendix is longer, but the 80 pages is just kind of loose, funny stuff because that's how it happened. And indeed, before I published it, the second edition and the first, I gave it to all three boys and I said, okay, here's the book, man. What am I missing? What did I get wrong? And each kid came back to me and they said, that's pretty much how it happened.
Nice.
And there's your validation right there. That's pretty much how it happened, old man. So that was great too. There's one last thing I would tell parents too. My kids, you had me talk about them in the beginning. I don't actually talk about them that much because I wouldn't want to hear that from another parent if my kids were struggling. You know,
Mm,
I wouldn't want to hear it at all. But
that's true.
one of the things that I early on impressed upon them was the sports thing. I mean, I got them involved in lacrosse at 4 years old when they can barely throw a ball. And we went to other sports, soccer for a little while, football, swimming, wrestling. But I always did the sports thing. And I will say the sports metaphor is overused because that sport thing can be the theater, it can be the drama
Mm-hmm.
club, it can be the marching band, it can be the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, it can be the robotics club. Anywhere where you're around a like minded bunch of people kids who have a goal in mind and have supportive parents. Because in those environments, and the three things that will get a kid resilience faster than anything are being on a team, because guess what? Number one, there's camaraderie. Even if you
Mm-hmm.
don't like some of the guys in the team, you have to put up with them. The
Yes.
second thing is it's personal discipline. If you don't try to get better, your fanny's going to be on the bench season after season. And the
Mm-hmm.
third thing in like life, like perhaps what you faced in Desperate Rescue, is there's a winner and a loser at the end of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of every game there is, in every competition, and sometimes in life, in very tough circumstances like you were in, you want that kid who wants to win. Because if you get too complacent with losing, it's going to be a rough time for you for a lot of years. So those kind of things that parents can get their kids involved in are essential to taking advantage of what I said earlier, that 75% of their life that you're going to be around them.
I agree. You learn so much perseverance. And that's one thing I always tell my boys. I'm like, I don't care what you're in, but you have to be a part of something. And you said that
Yeah.
really well. It can be art, it can be band, it can be choir. You got to get plugged in somewhere. You also have in the back part of your book some great examples of how to have conversations with your kids and things to talk about of, what is the worst thing talking about yourself? What's the worst thing about me and what's the best thing about me? And just
Right.
to get them to start talking. We've all heard of the what was your high and what was your low of the day, but I
Yeah.
like that you put some examples in the book whenever you are on that car drive or on that walk or sitting around the dinner table, just some things to spark that conversation.
Yes, that's key. Getting a kid to talk can be pretty difficult.
Yes.
You got to glide into it, and you can't glide into it sometimes by just saying, "How was your day?" Like with my guys, I would just choose different random things like, "Hey, what's the best restaurant we've ever been to? What's the best hamburger you've ever had? And what's that? What kind of car is that over there? And what kind of stuff does it have on it in the console? Look at all those buttons." And so you engage the kid by asking about the whole world that's around them. That's what I tried to do. Sometimes you're effective at it and sometimes not. There's 4 or 5 points in that book where I put myself down, where I'm self-deprecating
Yeah.
because I didn't want the guys to get the idea that dad was walking on water or anything like that. So if you're authentic with your kids, they'll be authentic with you.
And humble too. I think,
Yeah.
especially for men, it might be a little bit easier for women, but just to be humble and be like,
Mhm.
hey, I messed up. I had a really hard day at work today. It was not that great. So they can see that part too.
Right. I think the humility is key. One of the best lessons I ever taught him was just about ambition. We live in DC, so we're surrounded by these massive buildings, 20, 30
Mhm.
stories tall here in Virginia. We would drive and we see them all over the place, even in the office parks around the suburbs. And we see them and we just marvel at them, the stone and brick and glass and steel all standing there. And I would say, one time we were doing this and I said, let me tell you a story. There's a guy up there on the seventh floor of that building over there, and he's sitting there staring at a computer screen. And on the desk is a mug like the one you made me in second grade for his coffee. And there's a picture of his family on the wall. And he was a big guy in high school. He was going to own 17 restaurants. He was going to go into real estate. He was going to sail around the world or be a jet pilot. He was going to be a stockbroker. But instead, he's sitting at that screen, staring at it, going, what in the hell am I doing here? I said, that guy is your dad. So you have got to get much farther than I did.
Mhm.
And of course, they were in shock and they didn't say a word for like half an hour. But the idea was if you give them that authentic look at life, they're going to try and try and try, knowing that the old man, their dad, has been perfectly honest with them about what it takes to make it.
Yeah, well said. I love that visual and that honesty, and it's practical too. Where can people find you? And I'm going to show your book one more time. It's a great cover. These are your boys. How old are they at this
Yes.
picture, if you can
Oh
remember?
my gosh. 8, 7, and I want to say 5. And then the
Great.
back, of course, shows what they turned out to be.
Yes.
There they are. Yeah.
If you're listening to this podcast and not watching, you may have to jump on and see what we're talking about. But I'll also put the book in the show notes so people can click and be able to find your
Sure.
book easily. And the name of
Yeah,
the
it's
book is 4 Lessons from My 3 Sons.
how you can raise resilient kids, and it's at my website, nelliganbooks.com.
How can people find you? You have your website.
Yes, ma'am. Also have a Facebook page. Who doesn't? Jeff Nelligan Books. Instagram page, Nelligan_books. And I've got a Twitter page at Resilient Sons. And there you'll find different blogs that I put up and podcasts that I do and all sorts of things that I trust will help parents in these very, very formative years that they have.
And the contracts you talked about are on your website. Is that correct?
Yes, they
The
are. And in
social
fact, you
okay.
know what? I can also send you the exact link to them. I'll
Okay.
make a note of doing that. Yeah. There's 5 up there, different kind of contracts because every family's different. We didn't have one because they didn't have phones to have a contract with. But I know many, many parents who've had these things and they live by them and they swear by them because the whole family is accountable to one another. Accountability actually is a very good thing.
It's in the Bible over and over again. That's why I talk about that a lot. It's like we need each other to hold one another accountable, if it's through a Bible study or a small group or whatever that looks like, and someone to lean on and ask questions to. So that's why your book's a great resource. This podcast episode will be a great resource, and I will add those links to the show notes. Is there
Great.
anything else you would like to share, Jeff, before we finish today?
Yeah. One last thing. I always go back 75% by the age of 12. That's all you'll see your kid and have an effect on them. The parent has got to be engaged in those years. And if they're past 12 or 14, then you just have to up the game enormously and seize away the phone and the screens and spend that time with them. That's going to change them and make them what you want them to be. Because if you don't do those sorts of things, your kid's never going to develop. And God forbid that kid is 24 living in your basement playing Minecraft. It's a very hard way to end, but that's the gravity of raising children, redeeming children in this age.
Mhm. You're right, and it's hard, but it's the truth. Jeff, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the wisdom. Thank you for the truth and the honesty that you've shared today. I can't tell you enough how much I appreciate it.
I had a wonderful time, Lauren, and thank you for having me on and what you
You're
do.
very much. Thank you so much.
Today's episode was a little different. This redemption story was not of healing of addiction or of a sickness, but really, how do we redeem the lives of our children and parenting in this society? And Jeff gave us a lot of great tips, and he was apologizing for being too harsh, but he was just speaking truth that we have to get control of the devices and the social media and just spending time with our kids. In 2 Peter 1:5 says, "For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control perseverance, and to perseverance godliness, and to godliness mutual affection, into mutual affection love. For if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ." We have to have self control in our social media, in our conversations, in the things that we put our focus on, and talking to our kids in love. That is hard. I will be the first person to say that. I get so frustrated. I can get short tempered. I'm like, just listen to me and do what I say. But the more I've learned to speak with grace and without anger and through love, my kids respond so much better if I can control myself. And so it's a good reminder that we always have to be prayerful and praying that God give us wisdom as we're raising these children. I would like to stop and pray for the person that maybe is struggling in this parenting season, that God would give them wisdom in the areas of their children. Father God, I thank you for Jeff, and I thank you for his wisdom, giving us a little bit of guidance and with his book. And God, you see the person that's listening right now, the struggles that they're having. Every child and every relationship and every situation is different. And God, would you help them be able to apply some of the things that they've learned tonight? Would you show them, Father, your grace, your love, your vision for their children, that you have a plan and a purpose for their children's lives, Father, and that you would equip that parent. You've already equipped them how to raise their children the way that you're calling them to raise them, Father. And if there is areas of depression and anxiety, I just speak grace and love and healing over those areas, Father, and confidence, Father, and perseverance to overcome the hard things, Jesus. I thank you, God, that you chase after our children, that you love them more than we can even love them, and that you want good for them. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much for following on the Redeem podcast. If you haven't yet subscribed to the Redeem newsletter, you don't want to miss out. There's a lot of great stuff in the newsletter that I send it every other week, so you won't get too many things filling up your email. As always, I hope you know that you are loved, that God sees you, that He calls you His, and that you are redeemed. I hope you have a fantastic day. Until next time.